Hello and welcome to this short explainer video. My name is Antonina Scheer. I'm Deputy Director for Policy at the TPI Centre. In this video, we'll explain the consultation process that we've just launched for the ASCOR tool. In this presentation, we'll go through an introduction of the consultation process. We'll go through some questions where we want to understand how the ASCOR tool can continue to support investor objectives. We will propose an exploration of the framework structure and gather feedback on that, and finally close with a couple next steps. ASCOR stands for Assessing Sovereign Climate-Related Opportunities and Risks. It's an investor-led project that we've been collaborating with an advisory committee on for the last several years. Our advisory committee is composed of asset owners, asset managers, and key investor networks. We at the TPI Centre are the academic research expert, and we make the methodology, results, and data sources available on the online tool. ASCOR currently assesses 85 countries. This is a significant universe that enables many different investor use cases, in particular because now we cover 4 major sovereign bond market indices. Just to lay out the evolution of the ASCOR framework, it started in 2022 with an initial framework developed with the advisory committee members. In 2023, we held an initial consultation on the very first version, version 0, which was then modified based on feedback collected during the consultation. We developed the first version of the ASCOR framework and published 25 countries. Those were our pilot countries. In 2024, we expanded significantly the assessment universe to 70 countries and also published some minor adjustments to the framework methodology in version V1.1. In 2025, just last month, we published an assessment of 85 countries, again with slight modifications to the methodology in version 1.2. These different versions of the ASCOR methodology were minor adjustments and therefore didn't involve a consultation. This year, we're launching today a consultation process to explore potential major updates to the ASCOR framework. In January, we'll be holding consultation roundtables and the consultation survey. This public consultation we're holding has 4 key elements. First is a consultation report that you'll be able to find on our website. There is a consultation survey where you can enter all of your feedback, and this will be open until the 31st of January 2026. We have this explainer video. And finally, we are holding a number of roundtables, specifically with investors, sovereign issuers, and MDBs to participate and offer more in-depth feedback through a discussion. There are a few key sections in the report that I want to outline to explain how to participate. The opening introductory section is just an overview of ASCOR and explains the goals of the consultation process, which is to maintain ASCOR as an up-to-date, relevant tool. In the second section, we revisit how ASCOR can continue to meet investor needs with open-ended questions on the content, the size, whether it's appropriate, whether the tool is intuitive and usable. In the third section, we have an exploration of the framework structure, and here we propose a novel layer of sectoral analysis that's at a deeper level from what we do at the moment. Finally, we have an appendix of the report which includes a number of other methodological changes that we have under consideration. There are several challenges and potential solutions to these challenges, and we want to understand from stakeholders which of these are most important and which solutions are most appropriate. So moving to the first section of the consultation report, we have a number of questions to revisit whether and how ASCOR can continue to meet the objectives of investors as well as sovereign issuers. The framework as we have it now is structured into 3 pillars. We want to assess recent performance, climate ambition, and then a number of policies and climate finance topics to understand the accountability and credibility of sovereigns in meeting their stated targets. We have an open-ended question in the survey, which is, do the current areas of the framework and the current structure, do they still meet comprehensively what investors want with respect to understanding sovereign management of climate risks and opportunities. Are there any gaps in the current framework that we should be considering and filling? The tool itself is made available for investors and other users. We provide a link to download the data in CSV. You can compare countries' emissions pathways and access specific web pages for each country to analyze those results. We have a general open-ended question in the consultation around the information and functions that we have on the tool, whether these are intuitive and decision useful, and how we might improve them. One area of analysis that we have in the State of the Sovereign Transition reports is a synthesis or aggregation of country results into pillar scores. We have a first pillar score that groups together all of the metrics and indicators under the emissions pathways pillar, and the second score that groups together all of the indicators and metrics under the two other pillars, climate policies and climate finance. These pillar scores are useful in our analysis to compare countries and particularly to compare groups of countries. We don't include these aggregate scores on the ASCOR tool. That was a core principle in the initial development of ASCOR. But the methodology that we use to create these aggregations and a table of results that shows each country listed by income group and by quartile of how their pillar scores fall is included in the annual State of the Sovereign Transition reports. We would like to open up to feedback on these pillar scores, the approach, the way that we publish them, and whether we can improve this. There are a number of other topics we have in the survey that we would be grateful to hear feedback on. These include how we do outreach and communications, how that can be improved and expanded. We also have a couple questions about state-owned enterprises. Would there be relevant analysis on the climate performance of these types of entities? Would that help investors to better understand sovereign climate risk and opportunity? What form should that analysis take? We ask a similar question around publicly traded companies that are headquartered in the sovereign in question. Is there an interesting way to integrate that climate performance data into the ASCOR tool? We then have two rather open-ended questions, and I would explain that we have currently in the ASCOR framework a balance between creating a framework that will evolve to remain up to date, but also remaining as much as possible stable and continuing to provide data that investors can use to compare countries across years. We need to balance between that evolution and stability, and we want to understand from the users of the ASCOR tool, are we hitting that balance right? Should we keep it more stable? Should we have fewer evolutions to the framework each year, those minor adjustments that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation? Or should we continue to evolve in the way that it has been evolved so far? There's a second balancing question, which is between balancing flexibility and comparability in the assessments. This is again a balancing act that we have right now in our assessment process with our researchers, where they take special care to ensure that we take into account country-specific circumstances wherever relevant. That's the flexibility side, but we also need to ensure that for any given indicator, the assessment is comparable across countries. And this is again an open-ended question to understand whether we're hitting that balance right, whether there are feedback or advice from different users of the tool on how to better hit that balance. With that said, I'm going to hand over to my colleague now to walk you through the other sections of the consultation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Antonina. My name is Satina Izlov. I'm the Sovereign Project Lead at the TPI Center. In this third section, we are exploring a potential needs structure for the ASCOR framework. Nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, are the main tools that countries announce their emissions reduction targets. However, these documents often miss details on how a country is planning to achieve these targets. Therefore, there is a growing interest in credible, investable, and implementable NDCs. As a way of reaching this level of granularity, sectoral transition plans come forward. Such plans can help translating national targets into sectoral pathways, concrete policy actions, and financing strategies. This way, they can enable assessing credibility of NDCs. In line with this, we are exploring a new structure for the ASCOR framework in 2 steps. First, we are revisiting the 3-pillar structure to better communicate the cycle of national transition planning. And second, we considered adding a sector-specific scope into each pillar of the framework. This is the current 3-pillar structure, which includes emissions performance and targets, as well as climate policies and finance. And in this new structure, we are splitting the emissions pathways into 2 pillars to better interpret the 2 elements in this pillar, which are performance and ambition. Policy and finance pillars remain the same with some adjustments and additions. And this new structure could actually enable the users of the ASCOR tool to better interpret the cyclical relationship between these pillars. Historical performance informs how credible the targets are. Policies show implementation of targets. Finance flows demonstrate how policy implementation is enabled and how performance is delivered. With this, we are asking if the current structure already meets the objectives of the users, or this new structure will be more informative to interpret the country performance in transition to a low-carbon economy. In the second step, we introduce a new dimension to differentiate between economy-wide and sector-specific layers. In the current framework, we have a dedicated area for sectoral transition. And in this area, we assess if a country has a multi-sector strategy that sets quantified decarbonization targets and policy actions for 5 sectors. We also assess different sectoral targets and policies in terms of energy efficiency, mandatory climate-related disclosure, electricity sector decarbonization, and protected areas. We would like to find out if this level of information regarding sectoral transitions is sufficient, or it would be more intuitive to provide a sector-specific scope for further analysis. This is a reminder for the current structure of the ASCOR framework with 3 pillars and respective areas for each pillar. With the new structure, we are exploring the ways of reorganizing some of the information that we already have and creating new areas where relevant. Under the 4-pillar system, you see that most of the current areas remain broadly stable, while we are adding scope elements for economy-wide and sector-specific analysis. We are splitting some of the areas to align with the new themes and enhance their interpretability. We consider adding 2 new areas to assess emissions trends and investment plans at the sector level. The purpose of this potential restructuring is to summarize how things could be reorganized in a more informative and intuitive way. This new structure comes with some pros and cons. In terms of the positive sides, we already have sector-specific data through our assessments of multi-sector decarbonization strategies. However, these are not visible on the tool by sector. And this new structure would actually enable us to provide more interpretable information by sector. Another pro is that each country has unique sectoral and economic characteristics, which can be acknowledged better by showing more granular information on their emissions profile by sector. And finally, the potential new area on sectoral investment plans could inform investors on financing strategies of developed countries. In terms of the downsides of this new structure, there are some limitations, especially in terms of sectoral data because sectoral data is often limited and inconsistent across different sources. In line with the unique sectoral profile of countries, it is also challenging to build a consistent and comparable methodology. And finally, planning sectoral transition would require strong coordination mechanisms, and in the absence of such mechanisms, countries may face policy fragmentation. Considering these pros and cons, we are exploring the feasibility and potential added value of this new layer of sector-specific analysis. If we were to proceed with this option, we would test it with a subset of countries, such as G7 or G20 countries, and we would like to know if an in-depth analysis on a subset of countries would be useful for the users of the tool. Finally, Appendix 1 of the consultation report and survey outline potential methodological changes in the framework that would address the challenges that we have identified so far. For example, currently we assess emissions performance and targets against 1.5 degree targets benchmarks, but now these do not seem effectively feasible and only few countries in the ASCOR universe have targets that align with these benchmarks. Therefore, we are exploring an additional below 2 degree benchmark to differentiate country performance and enhance comparability. The ASCOR framework includes country exemptions in some areas, for example, in terms of committing to phase out new oil and gas production, we only assess high-income countries, or in terms of disclosing the cost of implementing mitigation and adaptation goals, we only assess developing countries. Now, we are revisiting these exemptions to explore the possibility of expanding the coverage of assessed countries. Final example of methodological changes is to add a binary yes or no indicator for renewable energy opportunities. This indicator would assess progress in renewable energy deployments. With that, we conclude a summary of changes in the consultation report. Here you see the timeline and the next steps for the consultation. The survey will remain open until the 31st of January, and in the survey it is possible for respondents to skip any sections and focus on those sections that they are most interested in. The survey responses will inform our research and they will be incorporated to the second version of the ASCOR framework where possible. Depending on the responses and further research, there may be additional changes that are not covered in the consultation report. And some of the potential new indicators may be tested only in beta form for a selected number of countries. We will provide a summary of the survey results in the ASCOR Progress Note 2026 before we launch the new methodology notes and country assessment results. Thank you for your interest in the ASCOR framework consultation process. We hope you found this video helpful and we are looking forward to receiving your feedback. If you have any questions regarding the consultation survey or the ASCOR tool, please reach out to the TPI Center research team from the email address.